Before we begin, if you're enjoying these stories from tribal law enforcement, please take a moment to subscribe and hit that like button. It really helps us bring you more of these accounts. And I'm curious, where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments. Whether you're in Arizona, New York, or halfway across the globe, I appreciate you being here. Now, let's get into this story from 2024. My name is Lisa Yazzie, and I'm a patrol officer with the Navajo Tribal Police, Kayenta District. I'm 29 years old, born and raised right here on the nation, and 2 years ago I made the decision to come back home after finishing my computer science degree at Arizona State. A lot of people asked me why I'd returned to a place with limited opportunities, why I'd become a cop instead of taking a tech job in Phoenix or California. The answer was simple. My people needed officers who understood both worlds, the traditional and the modern, the old ways and the new tech. I never expected that combination would save lives, and I never expected it would also show me something that broke every law of physics I'd learned in college. This happened 3 weeks ago in late November 2024. I was working the day shift, driving patrol through Kayenta and the surrounding area. It was a Tuesday, cold and clear, the kind of day where you could see for miles across the red rocks and mesas. I'd just finished a welfare check on an elderly man who lived alone near the edge of town when the call came in. Unit 14, we've got a missing persons report. 3 hikers, family of 3, didn't return from Monument Valley yesterday evening. Last known location, Wildcat Trail area. I grabbed my radio. Unit 14, copy that. Can you give me descriptions? David Miller, white male, 42. Karen Miller, white female, 40. Emma Miller, white female, 14. They were staying at the Goulding's Lodge, went out for an afternoon hike yesterday around 2 p.m. Expected back by 6. Never returned. Hotel reported it this morning when they didn't check out. Tourists going missing in Monument Valley wasn't uncommon. The landscape was vast and disorienting, especially for people who weren't used to desert terrain. Most of the time we found them within a few hours, dehydrated and embarrassed but alive. Still, the fact that a 14-year-old was involved elevated the urgency. On my way, ETA 15 minutes. I headed toward the ranger station at Monument Valley Tribal Park, where the command post for search and rescue operations would be set up. As I drove, I called my sergeant, Thomas Benally, to update him. "We're activating full S&R protocol," he said. "I want you to deploy the drone. That's your specialty." The drone. 6 months ago, our department had received a grant to purchase a DJI Mavic 3 Thermal, a high-end drone with both regular 4K cameras and thermal imaging capability. I'd been trained as the primary operator, spending weeks learning its systems, its capabilities, its limitations. In the short time we'd had it, the drone had already helped us locate 2 missing children and document 3 crime scenes. It was a game-changer for a department that covered thousands of square miles of remote terrain. "Copy that, Sarge. Drone is in my vehicle. I'll have it up as soon as I get to the staging area." I arrived at the ranger station 20 minutes later. A small crowd had already gathered. Park rangers, a few volunteers from the community, and a Bureau of Indian Affairs officer who happened to be in the area. The search coordinator, Ranger Mike Harrison, briefed us quickly. Miller family, experienced hikers from Colorado. They had permits, they had maps, they had plenty of water and supplies. They're not idiots, but they didn't come back, and their vehicle is still in the parking lot. We're treating this as a serious situation, especially because of the minor. "What was their planned route?" I asked. Harrison pointed to a map spread across the hood of his truck. Wildcat Trail, the 3.2-mile loop. It's marked, it's maintained. It's literally impossible to get lost on if you stay on the path. But we've had reports of people wandering off trail to get better photos, especially near the Mittens and Merrick Butte. I looked at the map, calculating search zones in my head. The trail was in a valley between massive sandstone formations, with dozens of side canyons and washes where someone could potentially get lost or injured. Ground searchers could cover the main trail quickly, but the surrounding area would take days without air support. "I'll get the drone up," I said. "The thermal imaging should be able to spot them if they're out there, even in the shadows or behind rocks." I went back to my unit and retrieved the drone case. The DJI Mavic 3 Thermal was a beautiful piece of technology, compact enough to carry in a backpack but powerful enough to see heat signatures from 400 feet up. I did a quick pre-flight check. Batteries fully charged, gimbal functioning, thermal camera calibrated. Everything green. Within 10 minutes, I had the drone airborne. I stood in the parking lot, controller in my hands, watching the live feed on the attached iPad screen. The drone climbed to 200 feet, and I began a systematic grid search of the Wildcat Trail area. The visual camera showed the stunning landscape in perfect detail. Red rocks, blue sky, the twisted junipers clinging to impossibly steep slopes. I switched to thermal mode, and the screen changed to a false color display of heat signatures. Cool areas showed up as deep purple and blue, while warm areas glowed yellow, orange, and red. "Anything yet?" Harrison asked, standing beside me. "Nothing so far. Let me extend the search pattern." I flew the drone in expanding circles, covering the main trail first, then the side canyons. The thermal camera picked up small mammals, birds, a few desert bighorn sheep, but no human heat signatures. After 30 minutes, I'd covered the entire Wildcat Trail area with no results. "They're not on the trail," I reported, expanding search to the surrounding canyons. I pushed the drone further out, into the less traveled areas north of the Mittens. The terrain here was rougher, with deep washes and hidden alcoves where someone could easily be concealed from ground view. The battery indicator showed 30 minutes of flight time remaining. And that's when I saw them. On the thermal display, 3 bright orange-red signatures appeared, clustered together in a small canyon about half a mile off the main trail. The heat signatures were clearly human-shaped, sitting or lying close together. "I've got them," I said, my pulse quickening. 3 signatures, appears to be together, approximately 0.5 miles northeast of Merrick Butte. "Can you get visual confirmation?" Harrison asked. I switched from thermal to visual camera and zoomed in. The resolution was incredible. I could clearly see 3 people, a man, a woman, and what appeared to be a younger person, possibly a teenager. They were sitting in the shade of a rock overhang, and they looked okay, not injured or in distress. Visual confirmation, 3 individuals, appears to match the description of the Miller family. They look mobile, no obvious injuries. Relief rippled through the group. Harrison immediately began organizing a ground team to hike to their location. "Keep the drone on them," he instructed. "Guide us in." I nodded and adjusted the drone's position to maintain visual contact. That's when I noticed something odd. I switched back to thermal mode to get a better sense of their heat signatures, maybe determine if anyone was hypothermic or showing signs of heat illness. The thermal display showed 3 signatures where the Millers were sitting, but it also showed 3 signatures about 200 yards to the east, and 3 more signatures 300 yards to the south, and 3 more signatures 400 yards to the west. I stared at the screen, confused. 12 heat signatures total, clustered in 4 groups of 3, each group showing identical positioning and identical thermal profiles. "That's not possible," I muttered. "What's wrong?" Harrison asked, moving closer to look at my screen. I'm seeing multiple groups, 4 different locations, 3 people each, but they're all showing the same thermal profile." Harrison frowned. Equipment malfunction? Thermal echo or something? There's no such thing as thermal echo. I cycled through the camera modes, checking for glitches. Visual, thermal, back to visual. Each time I switched to visual mode, I could see the Millers clearly in their original location. But when I switched to thermal, I saw all 4 groups. Maybe the thermal sensor is picking up residual heat from where they walked earlier, Harrison suggested. Body heat dissipates in minutes, not hours, and these signatures are active, real time. I made a decision. I flew the drone to the second location, the one 200 yards to the east, switched to visual mode. The Millers were there too. Same people. David Miller in his blue jacket, Karen in her red fleece, Emma in her gray hoodie. They were sitting in the exact same positions, in the exact same configuration, as if they'd been copied and pasted into a different location. My hands started shaking on the controller. "Harrison, look at this." I showed him the visual feed. Then I flew the drone back to the first location. Same people, same positions. I flew to the third location, same. Fourth location, same. The Miller family was in 4 places at once. "That's got to be a camera glitch," Harrison said, but his voice betrayed his doubt. Some kind of digital artifact, a stuck frame, or the thermal signatures are independent from the visual camera. Different sensors, different processors. They can't both be glitching the same way. I flew the drone back to the first location and zoomed in as close as I could without losing image quality. The Millers were moving now. David stood up, stretched, looked around. Karen was checking her phone, probably seeing no signal. Emma was drinking from a water bottle. I kept the drone fixed on them and simultaneously checked the other locations on the thermal display. All 4 groups were moving in exact synchronization. When David stood up in location 1, the David in location 2, 3, and 4 stood up at exactly the same time. When Emma took a drink, all 4 Emmas took a drink. Perfect synchronization. Identical movements. Impossible movements. "I need to check the other locations again," I said. "This can't be real." I spent the next 10 minutes flying the drone between all 4 locations, documenting everything. The visual camera confirmed it every time. The Millers were present in all 4 locations simultaneously. They weren't just similar-looking people. They were the same people, down to every detail. Same clothes, same mannerisms, same movements happening at the exact same time. When I flew over location 3, Emma looked up at the drone and waved. I immediately checked the other locations. Emma was waving at the drone in all 4 places, in perfect synchronization. The AI system in the drone started giving me error messages. Warning: multiple subjects detected with identical biometric profiles. Error: subject tracking failure. Multiple overlapping. Targets. Alert: impossible spatial configuration. The drone's artificial intelligence, designed to identify and track individual people, couldn't process what it was seeing. Its algorithms were built on the assumption that one person couldn't be in multiple places at once. The system was experiencing the digital equivalent of a mental breakdown. Harrison was on his radio, talking to the ground search team. "Hold position, we have a situation here that we need to understand before we proceed." "What kind of situation?" the team leader asked. Harrison looked at me, and I could see he was struggling with how to explain this. "The drone is showing anomalous readings. We need to verify before we send you in." I continued flying the drone, trying different approaches, different altitudes, different camera settings. Nothing changed. 4 Miller families existing simultaneously in 4 different locations, all perfectly synchronized. My radio crackled. It was Sergeant Benally. "Unit 14, what's your status? I'm hearing reports of equipment malfunction." "Sarge, it's not a malfunction. I don't know what it is, but it's not equipment failure. Explain. I took a deep breath. The missing family is showing up in 4 different locations simultaneously. Visual confirmation at all 4 sites. Thermal imaging confirms 4 groups with identical heat signatures. The subjects are moving in perfect synchronization across all 4 locations. The drone's AI system is flagging it as impossible. Silence on the radio for a long moment. Say again? The family is in 4 places at once. I have video documentation. More silence. Then, return to station. Bring all the footage. We need to see this. I wanted to argue, wanted to stay and figure out what was happening, but I also knew this was beyond anything I could handle alone. I brought the drone back, landed it, and packed everything up. Harrison stood there staring out at the valley where 4 versions of the Miller family were sitting, waiting for rescue that we suddenly didn't know how to deliver. "What do we tell them?" he asked quietly. "The ground team. The Miller's family back in Colorado. What do we tell anyone?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But we need to figure it out fast, because if what the drone is showing is real, we have a much bigger problem than 3 missing hikers." "What problem?" I looked back at the iPad, at the thermal display showing 4 identical groups of 3 people. How do you rescue someone who exists in 4 places at once? Which one is real? Are they all real? And if we go to one location to get them, what happens to the other 3? The questions hung in the air, unanswered. I drove back to the station with the drone and all the SD cards containing the footage. My mind was racing, trying to find a rational explanation. Mass hallucination. But the cameras didn't hallucinate. Equipment failure. But multiple independent systems showing the same thing. Elaborate hoax. But who would do that, and how? At the station, I downloaded all the footage onto the main computer and called Sergeant Benally and 2 other officers into the conference room. I played it for them, the whole sequence. The initial detection, the thermal anomaly, the visual confirmation at all 4 sites, the synchronized movements. They watched in silence. When the footage ended, nobody spoke for a full minute. Finally, Officer Jake Small Canyon, one of the senior guys, said what we were all thinking. "That's not possible." "I know," I said, "but there it is." Benally replayed the section where Emma waved at the drone in all 4 locations. The timestamp is identical, same second, same frame. They're not taking turns. They're all happening simultaneously. "Could it be some kind of reflection?" Officer Rita Yazzie asked. "Light bouncing off the rocks, creating multiple images. Thermal imaging doesn't work that way. Heat signatures can't be reflected like light." "Then what the hell are we looking at?" Jake demanded. I'd been thinking about this during the drive back, and I had a theory. A crazy theory. But the only one that even began to make sense given what we knew about the area. "There's a Navajo elder who lives near here. My grandmother's friend. His name is Thomas Whitehorse. He's a medicine man, but he also has a degree in physics from UNM. He talks about places where the old knowledge and the new science intersect. I think we need to talk to him." Benally raised an eyebrow. "You want to bring a medicine man into an active search and rescue operation?" "I want to bring someone who might understand what we're seeing, because nothing in my training, nothing in my education, nothing in any manual explains this." Benally thought about it, then nodded. "Fine, but we also need to figure out what to tell the ground search team. They're waiting for direction. Tell them to hold position. Don't approach any of the locations until we understand what we're dealing with." I left the station and drove to Thomas Whitehorse's place, a traditional hogan about 5 miles outside of Kayenta. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. As I pulled up, I saw Thomas sitting outside, watching the sunset like he'd been expecting me. He was in his 70s, with long white hair pulled back in a traditional knot, wearing jeans and a faded ASU Physics Department t-shirt. The combination perfectly captured who he was: traditional and modern, old and new, ceremonial and scientific. "Ya'ati Shimasani," I greeted him. "Hello, my grandfather." "Ya'ati, granddaughter. You have the look of someone who's seen something they can't explain." "I need your help. I need someone who understands both worlds." He gestured for me to sit beside him. "Show me." I pulled out my tablet and played the drone footage. He watched without interruption, his expression thoughtful but not surprised. When it finished, he nodded slowly. "4 worlds," he said simply. "What do you mean?" "In our creation stories, there are 4 worlds. The first world, the second world, the third world, and the fourth world where we live now. They exist simultaneously, stacked like layers. Most people never see beyond their own world. But there are places, thin places, where the layers touch, where you can see through." "Are you saying the Millers somehow traveled to different worlds?" "No. I'm saying they're in all 4 worlds at once. Your drone isn't malfunctioning. It's seeing truly. It's seeing what the human eye normally can't see, the simultaneity of existence. That's not possible. People can't exist in multiple places at once." Thomas smiled. "In quantum physics, particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously until they're observed. Superposition, they call it. Your people's science is finally catching up to what we've always known. Reality is not as solid as it appears. But these are people, not particles. The distinction is less clear than you think, especially in places of power, places where the Earth's energy is strong. Monument Valley is one of those places. The rock formations are not just beautiful, they're focal points, concentrations of natural force. And recently, something has changed. The layers are getting thinner." "Why? What changed?" He looked out at the darkening sky. "Many things. Climate change is disrupting the natural balance. Drought is weakening the Earth. And there's something else. Magnetic anomalies. Scientists from the university came here 6 months ago, measuring the magnetic field. They found irregularities, fluctuations, the kind that shouldn't exist naturally. My scientific mind wanted to reject this, but I'd seen the footage. I'd seen the impossible made visible. If what you're saying is true, if the Millers are existing in 4 different versions of reality simultaneously, how do we rescue them? Which version do we save?" Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "That's the hard question. In quantum physics, when you observe a particle in superposition, it collapses into a single state. The same principle might apply here. When you interact with one version of the Millers, you force a collapse. The other 3 versions might cease to exist. You're saying if we rescue one family, the other 3 disappear? I'm saying you might have to choose which version becomes real, and the others become impossible." I felt sick. I can't make that choice. How do I choose which version of a 14-year-old girl gets to exist and which ones just vanish? "You're thinking about it wrong. They're not different people. They're all the same people, existing in different possibilities simultaneously. When you choose, you're not erasing them. You're deciding which possibility becomes the actuality. That doesn't make it easier. No, it doesn't." I drove back to the station with Thomas's words echoing in my head. When I arrived, Sergeant Benally was waiting with news. "The situation is escalating. The Millers' family in Colorado is calling every 10 minutes. Media is starting to pick up the story, and the ground search team is getting restless. We need to make a decision." I talked to Thomas Whitehorse. He says this is a quantum phenomenon. The Millers are in superposition, existing in 4 states simultaneously. He says when we interact with one version, the others will collapse. Benelli stared at me. You're telling me we have to choose which family is real? According to Thomas, yes. Based on what? How do we know which one to choose? I don't know. Maybe they're all equally real. Maybe it doesn't matter which one we choose. Or maybe... I trailed off, struck by a thought. Maybe what? Maybe we should ask them, let them choose. I returned to the drone, launched it again as night was falling. The thermal imaging would work even better in the cold darkness. I flew to the first location, where the Millers were huddled together for warmth. Using the drone's speaker system, I called down to them. David Miller, this is Officer Lisa Yazzie, Navajo Tribal Police. Can you hear me? David looked up at the drone and nodded, waving his arms. We know where you are. We're coming to get you, but first I need to ask you some questions. Do you have any idea why you're here? Do you remember anything unusual happening? David looked confused. He gestured at his phone, pointing to show no signal. Right. They couldn't respond verbally from that distance. I needed a different approach. I flew the drone lower and used its camera to zoom in on David's face. He was mouthing words. I recorded the video and flew back to the station, where we could analyze the lip movements. Our dispatcher, who'd been trained in lip reading for deaf community interactions, watched the footage. He's saying, we don't know what happened. 1 minute we were taking photos, the next minute we were here. How long have we been gone? 1 minute. They'd been missing for over 24 hours, but from their perspective, it had been 1 minute. Time dilation. Another impossible thing added to the list. I checked the footage from the other 3 locations. In each one, David was saying the exact same words, at the exact same time. Perfect synchronization across all 4 realities. We need to make a decision, Benelli said. We can't leave them out there all night. The temperature is dropping. Even if they're in 4 places, they can all die of hypothermia in 4 places. He was right. Whatever theoretical quantum physics principles were at play, cold was cold, and we had a duty to rescue these people. But the question remained, which version? And what would happen to the others? As I stood there, staring at the 4 groups of thermal signatures on my screen, I realized something that made my blood run cold. There was a 5th signature appearing on the thermal display, one I hadn't noticed before because I'd been focused on the Millers. It was showing my heat signature. In 4 different places. I was in superposition too. The choice was mine to make. But first, I had to figure out which version of me was real. I stared at the thermal display, at the 5 heat signatures scattered across the landscape. 4 were clustered in groups of 3, the Miller families in their impossible superposition. The 5th signature stood alone, near the ranger station parking lot where I'd been operating the drone. That was me. Or rather, that was one version of me. But the thermal imaging also showed my signature in 3 other locations, each one corresponding to one of the Miller family positions. I was spread across the same 4 realities they were trapped in. Banally, I said, my voice shakier than I wanted it to be. Look at this. He came over and studied the screen. His face went pale as he realized what he was seeing. That's your heat signature. In 4 places. When did this happen? I've been here the whole time, operating the drone from the parking lot. I haven't moved. Benelli looked at me, then back at the screen, then at me again, as if trying to reconcile the physical person in front of him with the quantum impossibility on the display. The drone shows different, he said quietly. According to this, you're out there, in all 4 locations. I felt a wave of vertigo wash over me. The rational part of my brain insisted this was impossible, but I'd seen too much in the past few hours to trust rationality anymore. The drone didn't lie. The thermal imaging didn't hallucinate. If it showed me in 4 places, then somehow, in some way I didn't yet understand, I was in 4 places. I need to review all the footage from the beginning, I said. Frame by frame. I need to see exactly when this started. We spent the next hour in the conference room going through every second of drone footage on the big screen. Finally, Jake and Rita watched with me, all of us searching for the moment when impossible became reality. The footage showed the systematic grid search, the discovery of the first Miller group, the shock of finding them duplicated across 4 locations, and then, at timestamp 16:23:47, exactly 3 seconds after I'd flown the drone to confirm the second Miller location, my thermal signature split. One moment, there was a single heat signature at the ranger station, operating the drone. The next moment, that signature was in 2 places, then 3, then 4. The split happened so fast it was almost subliminal. If we hadn't been looking for it frame by frame, we would have missed it. It happened when you confirmed visual on the second group, Rita observed, when you saw them with your own eyes through the camera. Observer effect, I muttered. Thomas Whitehorse mentioned it. In quantum mechanics, the act of observation affects the thing being observed. But you didn't observe yourself, Jake pointed out. You observed them. Maybe observation works both ways. Maybe when I looked at their superposition, I became entangled with it. Quantum entanglement. I was reaching for half-remembered concepts from my college physics classes, trying to apply theoretical principles to a situation that shouldn't exist. Benelli stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkness where Monument Valley lay. We need expert help, someone who actually understands this stuff, not just people guessing based on science documentaries. Thomas Whitehorse, I mean a scientist, a physicist, someone who can tell us what we're dealing with in terms we can act on. I thought about it. There's a woman, Dr. Sarah Nez. She got her PhD in quantum physics from MIT, but she's Navajo, from Chelly originally. I heard she came back to teach at Diné College last year. She might be able to help. Call her, now. I don't care if it's 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. We need answers before someone dies out there. I found Dr. Nez's contact information through the college directory and called her cell phone. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounding curious rather than annoyed. Dr. Nez, this is Officer Lisa Yazzie, Navajo Tribal Police. I'm sorry to call you so late, but we have an emergency situation that involves quantum physics, and I was told you're the person to talk to. There was a pause. Quantum physics and tribal police don't usually go together. What kind of emergency? The kind where people are existing in 4 places simultaneously and I need to understand why before someone dies. Another pause, longer this time. I'm in Chelly. That's about 2 hours from Kayenta. I can be there by 10:30. I'll meet you at the station. While we waited for Dr. Nez to arrive, I made another drone flight, this time with specific purpose. I needed to understand the geography of this phenomenon. Where were the boundaries? How far did it extend? And most importantly, was it getting worse? The night air was cold and still as I launched the drone. The thermal imaging painted the desert in shades of blue and purple, with the hot spots of the Miller families and my own duplicated signature glowing orange-red. I flew a systematic pattern, mapping the affected area. The 4 Miller locations formed a rough square, each about 400 yards from the center point. I marked that center on my map, a spot near the East Mitten Formation where several trails converged. Then I expanded the search pattern, flying in concentric circles around that center point. At first, I saw nothing unusual, just the normal thermal signatures of desert wildlife. But at about half a mile from center, I started seeing something strange. Ripples. That's the only way I can describe it. The thermal display showed wave-like distortions, as if reality itself was vibrating. Objects that should have been solid, rocks and trees, appeared to shimmer and multiply, their heat signatures blurring across multiple positions. I flew closer to one of these ripple zones and switched to visual mode. What I saw made my hands tighten on the controller. A juniper tree stood at the edge of a wash, but through the camera, I could see 4 versions of that tree, slightly offset from each other, all occupying nearly the same space, but not quite. They flickered like a bad video signal, each version becoming dominant for a fraction of a second before being replaced by another. The tree was in superposition, just like the Millers. Just like me. I documented everything, flying a complete circuit around the affected area. The ripples extended in a circle about 3/4 of a mile in diameter, with the 4 Miller locations at the cardinal points. Inside that circle, reality was fractured. Objects existed in multiple states. The normal laws of physics were suspended, and it was growing. I marked the boundary coordinates and then compared them to footage from my earlier flights. In just 3 hours, the affected zone had expanded by approximately 50 feet in all directions. If that rate continued, the ripple zone would reach the ranger station by tomorrow afternoon, would reach Kayenta in 3 days, would reach my grandmother's house in 5. I brought the drone back and waited for Dr. Nez, my mind racing with the implications. This wasn't just a rescue situation anymore. This was a potential catastrophe that could spread across the entire nation if we didn't stop it. Dr. Sarah Nez arrived at 10:42 p.m., driving a dusty Subaru Outback with university parking stickers and a "Science is Real" bumper sticker. She was in her late 30s with long black hair pulled into a practical ponytail, wearing jeans and a Diné college hoodie. She looked like what she was, someone who'd left the reservation to become a scientist and then came back home because home mattered more than prestige. I met her in the parking lot. "Dr. Nez, thank you for coming. Call me Sarah, and you can thank me after I tell you whether I can actually help." She grabbed a laptop bag from her car. "Show me what you've got." Inside the conference room, I played the complete footage for her. The initial discovery, the 4 Miller families, the synchronized movements, the ripple zones, and finally, my own thermal signature splitting across 4 locations. Sarah watched in silence, occasionally making notes on a tablet. When the footage ended, she sat back and stared at the ceiling for a long moment. "This shouldn't be possible," she said finally. "That's what we keep saying, but it's happening. No, you don't understand. This shouldn't be possible not just in the sense of that's weird, but in the sense of this violates fundamental laws of physics. Macroscopic quantum superposition doesn't happen in nature. Objects larger than molecules don't exist in multiple states simultaneously. Decoherence prevents it. Decoherence? The quantum world and the classical world are different. Quantum particles can be in superposition, but the moment they interact with the larger classical environment, that superposition collapses. It's why we don't see everyday objects in 2 places at once. The environment acts as a constant observer, forcing everything into a single state. But we are seeing it. The drone footage doesn't lie. Sarah nodded slowly. Which means something is preventing decoherence. Something is maintaining quantum superposition at a macroscopic scale. In an entire area of space. She looked at me. That should require energy levels we can't produce. We're talking about the kind of power you'd find near a black hole or during the Big Bang. Thomas Whitehorse mentioned magnetic anomalies. Scientists from the university were measuring the magnetic field 6 months ago. What kind of anomalies? He didn't give details, but he said they found fluctuations that shouldn't exist naturally. Sarah pulled out her phone and made a call. "Dr. Reeves, it's Sarah Nez. Sorry to call so late." "Yes, I know what time it is. Listen, you did magnetic field surveys in Monument Valley last spring, right? I need to see your data. No, right now. It's an emergency. Okay, yes, send it to my email. Thanks. She hung up and opened her laptop. James Reeves is a geophysicist at Northern Arizona University. If there's something weird about the magnetic field, he'll have documented it. 5 minutes later, her email pinged. She opened the attachment and started reading, her expression growing more concerned with each page. Oh, no. What is it? Reeves found a magnetic anomaly centered almost exactly where you said these phenomena are occurring. It's been there for decades, maybe longer, but it's been intensifying. The magnetic field strength in that area is fluctuating wildly, sometimes hitting levels that should be impossible without artificial magnets or massive iron deposits underground. What would cause that? He didn't know, but look at this graph. She turned the laptop so we could see. It showed magnetic field strength over time, with measurements going back 5 years. The line was relatively stable until about 6 months ago, when it started climbing dramatically. The rate of increase was accelerating. Something changed half a year ago, Sarah said. Something that's making the magnetic field stronger and more chaotic. I thought back to what had happened in the area. 6 months ago was when they installed the new cellular tower on the ridge above the valley. Better coverage for tourists. Sarah looked up sharply. Radio frequency emissions, EM radiation, that could interact with a magnetic anomaly. She started typing calculations on her tablet. If the magnetic field is strong enough and fluctuating rapidly enough, and you add strong EM radiation from a cell tower, you could create something like a particle accelerator effect. Not strong enough to split atoms, but maybe strong enough to maintain quantum coherence, to prevent things from collapsing into a single state. Exactly. The combination of natural magnetic anomaly and artificial EM radiation could be creating a kind of quantum isolation chamber, a space where superposition is protected from decoherence. Benelli had been listening quietly. Can we turn off the cell tower? That might help, Sarah admitted, but it won't fix the problem immediately. The affected area has already expanded significantly. Whatever process is maintaining the superposition has momentum now. It might continue even without the EM radiation. So, what do we do? I asked. We still have the Miller family out there, and they're running out of time. Sarah looked at the map showing the 4 Miller locations. In quantum mechanics, superposition collapses when an observation is made. The act of measurement forces the system to choose a single state. But this isn't a particle in a lab. This is people, existing in a real geographic area. If we try to rescue them, we're not just observing, we're interacting physically. Thomas Whitehorse said the same thing. He said, when we interact with one version, the others will cease to exist. He's probably right, based on quantum principles. But here's what worries me. We don't know which version will become real when the collapse happens. It might be the one we interact with. It might be a different one. It might be a random selection. Or... She hesitated. Or what? Or it might not be any of them. Sometimes, when superposition collapses, the system doesn't settle into one of the existing states. It settles into a new state that's a combination or average of all the possibilities. If that happens with people... She didn't need to finish the thought. I could imagine it, a Miller family that was somehow fractured, incomplete. Pieces of them pulled from different realities and forced together in ways that biology couldn't support. That can't happen, I said firmly. We have to find a way to rescue them intact. Then we need to understand the mechanism maintaining the superposition and disrupt it in a controlled way. Bring the whole affected area back into normal physics before we attempt rescue. How long will that take? Sarah checked her notes. If we can shut down the cell tower tonight, and if the magnetic field begins to stabilize, maybe 24 hours before it's safe to go in. They don't have 24 hours. The temperature out there is dropping below freezing. They're not equipped for a night in the desert, let alone 2 nights. Then we're in a difficult position. Sarah closed her laptop. We either try a rescue now, knowing we might cause a catastrophic collapse, or we wait and risk them dying of exposure. I looked at Benally. As the senior officer, the decision was ultimately his. He rubbed his face tiredly. What about a middle option? What if we send in supplies? Food, water, cold weather gear. Can we do that without triggering a collapse? Sarah considered it. Small-scale interaction. It might work. The key is not to try to move them or change their quantum state. Just provide support while we work on a solution. Lisa, can the drone carry supplies? Not much. It has a maximum payload of about 2 pounds, but we could make multiple trips. Do it. Pack whatever emergency supplies will fit. Blankets, hand warmers, energy bars. Drop them at all 4 locations. It was a plan, at least. I packed a small bundle, a Mylar emergency blanket, 3 chemical hand warmers, and 2 energy bars. The whole package weighed just under 2 pounds. I launched the drone at midnight, flying toward the first Miller location. The night was clear and bitterly cold, the temperature already down to 28 degrees. The thermal imaging showed the Millers huddled together, trying to share body heat. I positioned the drone directly overhead and deployed the drop mechanism we normally used for delivering medication to remote areas. The bundle fell away cleanly, landing a few feet from where David Miller sat. He looked up at the drone, then at the package. He reached for it, opened it, and immediately wrapped Emma in the emergency blanket. Karen activated the hand warmers and passed them around. David gave me a thumbs up. I flew to the second location and repeated the drop. Same people, same reactions, same thumbs up. Third location. Fourth location. All successful. As I was flying back, I noticed something on the thermal display. The 4 Miller signatures were still in superposition, but they'd changed slightly. They were closer together, as if the quantum states were converging rather than spreading apart. Sarah, look at this. She studied the display. The dropped supplies. They're the same in all 4 locations because you dropped the same items. You've introduced an element of consistency across all 4 quantum states. That might be helping to stabilize them. Is that good or bad? I honestly don't know, but it's interesting. I brought the drone back and immediately prepped another supply drop, this time with more hand warmers and a small first aid kit. As I was loading it, my phone rang. Unknown number. Officer Yazzie? Yes, who is this? Emma Miller. We found a phone in the supply drop. Thank you so much for the blankets and warmers, but I need to tell you something weird. My heart skipped. Emma, how are you calling me? That wasn't one of our phones. It was in the bundle. A cheap burner phone with your number programmed in. We thought you put it there. I looked at the supply bundles I'd prepared. No phones. I hadn't included phones. Emma, which location are you at? Location? I don't know what you mean. We're in a canyon, that's all I know. But Officer Yazzie, here's the weird thing. We can see ourselves. What do you mean? There are 3 other groups that look exactly like us. Same people, same clothes. They're in other canyons, but we can see them in the distance. It's like looking in a mirror, except the mirrors are far away. The quantum states were becoming aware of each other. The boundaries between realities were thinning. Emma, stay calm. We're working on getting you out. Don't try to approach the other groups. Don't try to interact with them. Just stay where you are. Okay. But Officer Yazzie, one more thing. We can see you too. 4 of you in 4 different places. Which one is real? I looked at Sarah. She looked back at me. Neither of us had an answer. I don't know, Emma. I don't know which one is real. I hung up and immediately checked the supply bundles again. No phones. But Emma had said there was a phone in the bundle we dropped. Sarah, this doesn't make sense. How could there be a phone in a bundle I didn't pack? Sarah's expression was troubled. Multiple realities. In one version of events you packed a phone. In another, you didn't. The quantum states are bleeding into each other. Items from one reality appearing in another. But I only packed one bundle. I dropped the same bundle 4 times. Did you? Or did 4 versions of you each pack slightly different bundles in 4 slightly different realities, and all 4 versions are now existing simultaneously? I felt dizzy. The implications were staggering. If items that could cross between the quantum states, if the 4 realities were influencing each other, then the boundaries were breaking down completely. We're running out of time, I said. The longer this goes on, the more unstable it becomes. We need to make a decision about the rescue. Benelli agreed. Sarah, your honest assessment. If we send in a ground team right now, what are the chances of a successful rescue? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Less than 50%. Maybe significantly less. But if we wait for the cell tower shutdown to take effect and the magnetic field to stabilize, the chances improve to maybe 70 or 80%. The trade-off is the exposure risk to the Miller family. What about Lisa? Benelli asked. She's in superposition too. What happens to her if we trigger a collapse? I don't know. She might collapse along with the rest of the affected area. She might remain split. It depends on which quantum state becomes dominant. I looked at my hands. They seemed solid, real, singular. But the thermal imaging said otherwise. Somewhere out there in the cold desert night, 3 other versions of me existed, going through the same thoughts, the same fears, the same impossible choices. I vote we try the rescue, I said. Now, tonight. We have people out there who are scared and cold and don't understand what's happening to them. Every hour we wait, the situation gets worse. I say we go in, we get them, and we deal with the quantum consequences as they come. That's easy for you to say, Jake pointed out. You're not the one who has to hike out there and try to grab people who exist in 4 places at once. I'll do it, I said. It's my case, my operation. I should be the one. You're already in superposition, Sarah said. Adding more quantum interaction might make things worse, or it might make things better. You said introducing consistency across the quantum states helped stabilize the Millers. Maybe if I physically go to one of the locations, it'll force a collapse in a controlled way. Benelli shook his head. Too risky, we don't know enough. We'll never know enough. This is unprecedented. There's no playbook for quantum rescue operations. We have to make our best guess and commit. We argued for another 20 minutes, but ultimately, Benelli made the call. We wait until dawn. That gives the cell tower shutdown 4 more hours to take effect. We use the time to prep the rescue team and plan the approach. Lisa, you guide us in with the drone, but you don't go yourself. That's an order. I wanted to argue, but knew he was right. I was too close to this, both literally and figuratively. At 2 a.m., crews shut down the cell tower on the ridge. Sarah monitored the magnetic field with borrowed equipment from the university. Within an hour, she reported that the fluctuations were beginning to decrease. It's working, she said. Slowly, but it's working. By dawn, the quantum isolation effect should be significantly weakened. I launched the drone again at 4 a.m. for a status check. The thermal imaging showed that the 4 Miller signatures were even closer together now, almost overlapping. The ripple zones were still present but less pronounced. and my own 4 signatures were converging too. Whatever was happening, we were all being pulled back toward a single state. At 5:30 a.m., as the first gray light appeared in the eastern sky, the ground rescue team assembled. 6 experienced officers and rangers, equipped with cold weather gear, GPS units, and emergency medical supplies. I briefed them on what they'd encounter. You're going to location 1, the northernmost position. That's where the quantum state appears most stable. When you reach the Millers, don't be alarmed if you see other versions of them in the distance. Don't try to interact with those versions. Focus only on the people directly in front of you. What about you? One of the rangers asked. Emma said they can see 4 of you. Will we see that too? I don't know. Probably. Just ignore it. Focus on the mission. The team headed out just as the sun crested the horizon, painting the red rocks in shades of gold and crimson. I followed their progress on the drone, providing real-time navigation. They reached the first Miller location at 6:47 a.m., and that's when everything started to collapse. Not just the quantum superposition, reality itself. The rescue team reached the Miller family at 6:47 a.m. Through the drone's visual camera, I watched as Team Leader Officer Jake Small Canyon approached the huddled group, his hands raised in a peaceful gesture. David Miller, I'm Officer Small Canyon, Navajo Tribal Police. We're here to get you out. David stood up slowly, helping Karen and Emma to their feet. They looked exhausted, hypothermic, but alive. Emma still had the emergency blanket wrapped around her shoulders. And that's when I saw it on the thermal display. The 4 Miller signatures, which had been converging slowly all night, suddenly snapped together like magnets. 4 distinct heat signatures collapsed into one in a fraction of a second. But it wasn't a clean collapse. The thermal image flickered wildly, showing the signature in one place, then slightly to the left, then above, then below, oscillating so rapidly it created a blur of orange-red light. The system was trying to resolve into a single state but couldn't decide which one. Sarah, are you seeing this? She was staring at her laptop, at the magnetic field data streaming in real time. The quantum state is collapsing, but it's not stable. It's bouncing between the 4 possibilities instead of settling on one. Through the visual camera, I could see Jake reaching out to help David. The moment his hand touched David's arm, both men flickered. Not like a video glitch, but like they were physically shifting between different positions, different states of existence. Jake jerked his hand back. What the hell? Jake, don't touch them again, I said into the radio. The quantum state is unstable. Physical contact might make it worse. How am I supposed to rescue them without touching them? Good question. I didn't have an answer. On the thermal display, the other 3 Miller signatures, the ones at the remaining 3 locations, were doing something even more disturbing. They were moving, not walking, but sliding across the landscape, being pulled toward the first location like water circling a drain. They're converging, Sarah said. All 4 quantum states are trying to occupy the same space simultaneously. What happens when they do? I don't know. Maybe they merge cleanly. Maybe they destroy each other. Or maybe something worse. Through the drone camera, I watched as the second Miller family, the one from the eastern location, appeared at the edge of the canyon. They weren't walking normally. They were phasing in and out of visibility, like ghosts, moving in stuttering jumps across the terrain. Jake and his team saw them too. I could hear the tension in his voice. Unit 14, we have visual on additional subjects. I don't know how to describe what they're doing. Jake, get out of there, now. Pull back to a safe distance. What about the Millers? We need to reassess. Get your team clear. Jake started backing away, his team following. But Emma Miller called out to them, "Please don't leave us. We're scared. Help us." And then, from 3 different directions simultaneously, 3 other Emmas called out the same words. "Please don't leave us. We're scared. Help us." 4 identical voices. 4 identical pleas, overlapping and echoing across the canyon. Jake stopped. I could see the conflict on his face, the professional training warring with basic human compassion. "Jake, I know this is hard, but you have to pull back. If you stay there during the collapse, you might get caught in it." He hesitated a moment longer, then made his decision. "Team, fall back. Establish perimeter at 200 yards. As the rescue team withdrew, I flew the drone higher to get a better view of what was happening. The 4 Miller families were still converging, but the process was accelerating. The boundaries between the quantum states were breaking down completely. Through the camera, I watched as 2 versions of David Miller came within 20 feet of each other. For a moment, they just stared at each other, mirror images frozen in mutual recognition. Then they reached out simultaneously, their hands meeting in the space between them. The moment they touched, there was a flash of light so bright it overloaded the camera's sensor. When the image cleared, there was only one David. But something was wrong with him. His features were blurred, indistinct, as if he was a photograph that had been averaged with another photograph. The same thing happened with Karen and Emma. As the 4 versions met and merged, they became singular but incomplete, like composite images that didn't quite align. "This is bad," Sarah said, her voice tight with concern. "The collapse is happening wrong. The quantum states aren't choosing one possibility, they're trying to average all 4. What does that mean for them? Think of it like this. If you have 4 images of a person and you overlay them, you get a blurry composite that's not really any of them. That's what's happening physically. Their bodies are trying to exist as an average of 4 different configurations, but biology doesn't work that way. Organs, neurons, cells, they can't exist in average states." I felt sick. "Are you saying they're dying?" "I'm saying they're becoming impossible, and impossible things don't last long in our universe." Through the drone camera, I could see the Miller family stumbling toward the rescue team, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. Jake was calling for medical support, but what kind of medical support do you provide for someone whose quantum state is fragmenting? And then I felt it, a pulling sensation, like gravity, but wrong. It wasn't pulling me down, it was pulling me apart. I looked at my hands and saw them flickering, the same way the Millers had flickered. One moment they were here, the next moment they were slightly to the left, then back again. "Benally, I think I'm collapsing too." He grabbed my arm to steady me, and the moment he touched me, he flickered too. His eyes went wide. "What's happening to me?" Sarah was frantically typing on her laptop. "The collapse is spreading. The quantum entanglement isn't limited to the affected area anymore. Everyone who's interacted with the phenomenon is now part of it. You, Lisa, because you observed it first. Jake and his team, because they entered the affected area. Benally, because he touched Lisa. How do we stop it? I don't know. This shouldn't be happening at all." The pulling sensation grew stronger. I could feel myself being stretched across multiple points in space, existing in 4 places simultaneously but unable to fully be in any of them. It was like being torn apart at the quantum level, my consciousness fragmenting across multiple realities. Through the drone feed, I saw something that made everything even worse. The rescue team, all 6 of them, were now flickering too, and behind them, coming up the canyon, were 3 more copies of the rescue team, converging from the other quantum locations. Everyone who'd gotten close to the affected area was duplicating. The quantum superposition was spreading exponentially. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. The caller ID said Lisa Yazzie. I was calling myself. With trembling hands, I answered. "Hello? This is Lisa Yazzie. I'm at the eastern location. I need you to listen to me carefully. I think I figured out what's happening." The voice was mine, but slightly different, like a recording that had been pitch shifted. "Who are you?" "I'm you, or a version of you, one of the 4 quantum states. I've been here since we first observed the Miller family. When our consciousness split, part of me ended up here." "That's not possible." "Neither is any of this. But listen, I've been watching what happens when the quantum states converge. The reason the collapse is failing is because we're trying to force all 4 possibilities into one reality. But that's not how it works. Only one possibility can be real. The others have to be released." "Released? What does that mean?" "It means someone has to choose which quantum state becomes real, and the person making that choice has to let go of the other possibilities. Not try to save them, not try to merge them, but actually let them go. Accept that they won't exist." I thought about what Thomas Whitehorse had said, about how choosing one possibility meant the others would cease to exist, about how I'd have to decide which version of a 14-year-old girl got to be real. I can't make that choice. How do I choose which people get to exist and which ones don't? You're not choosing between different people. They're all the same people, just in different quantum states. When you choose, you're not erasing anyone. You're deciding which possibility becomes actual. That doesn't make it easier. No, it doesn't. But someone has to do it. And it has to be you, because you're the observer. You're the one who's entangled with all 4 states. Your observation will collapse the wave function. What happens to you, to the other versions of me? There was a long pause. We'll stop existing. Or maybe we'll still exist, but you won't remember us. Quantum mechanics doesn't really have a good answer for that. But it doesn't matter. What matters is stopping this before it spreads to the entire valley, to Kayenta, to everyone. The pulling sensation was getting worse. I could see multiple versions of the conference room overlapping. 4 different positions of furniture, 4 different groups of people. Reality was fragmenting around me. How do I choose? What do I do? Go to the center point, the exact spot where the 4 quantum states converge. When you get there, you'll feel all 4 possibilities simultaneously. Choose the one that feels most real, most solid, most connected to your actual memories. Focus on that one and let the others go. And if I choose wrong? There is no wrong. Any of the 4 states can become real. The universe doesn't prefer one over another. But you have to commit completely. No second-guessing, no trying to save the others. One possibility, fully real. The call disconnected. I looked at Benally, who was flickering in and out of focus. I need to go to the convergence point. I need to end this. Lisa, you're in no condition to, no one else can do it. I'm already in quantum superposition. I'm entangled with the whole system. If anyone else tries, it'll just spread the entanglement further. Sarah nodded reluctantly. She's right. The observer who initiates the collapse has to be the same observer who created the superposition. That's you. I grabbed my gear and headed for my unit. Benally tried to follow, but I stopped him. No, you can't come. The more people involved, the worse this gets. You're not going alone into a quantum anomaly. I already am alone. There are 4 versions of me out there. I'll have plenty of company. I drove toward Monument Valley, following the GPS coordinates to the convergence point. The sun was fully up now, the red rocks glowing in the morning light. Under normal circumstances, it would have been beautiful. But nothing about this was normal. As I got closer to the affected area, the flickering got worse. I could see multiple versions of the road, multiple versions of my hands on the steering wheel, multiple versions of the landscape through the windshield. It was like looking through a kaleidoscope that kept shifting and rearranging. I parked at the base of East Mitten Butte and hiked the last quarter mile on foot. The pulling sensation was almost unbearable now, like invisible hands were trying to tear me into pieces. I could feel myself existing in 4 places simultaneously. My consciousness stretched thin across multiple realities. The convergence point was in a small clearing surrounded by red rocks. As I approached, I saw them. 3 other versions of me, coming from different directions, all converging on the same spot. We reached the center at the same moment and stood there, looking at each other. 4 identical women, wearing identical uniforms, carrying identical equipment. 4 possibilities that couldn't all be real, and I could feel it. The quantum states pressing against each other, trying to merge, trying to average, creating an impossible tension that reality itself couldn't sustain. One of the other Lisas spoke. "We have to choose." "How do we know which one is real?" another asked. "We're all real," the third said, "until one of us isn't." I thought about my memories, trying to determine which ones were most solid, most connected to a continuous timeline. But all 4 versions of me had the same memories up until the moment we'd observed the Miller family. After that, we'd diverged, each experiencing slightly different events in slightly different realities. Which version had stayed at the ranger station? Which version had made the phone calls? Which version was the real Lisa Yazzie? And then I realized it didn't matter. The quantum state that became real would have all the memories, all the experiences, all the consciousness of all 4 versions. The collapse wouldn't erase anything. It would integrate everything into a single, coherent timeline. I just had to choose and commit. I looked at the 3 other versions of myself. I'm choosing this one, this quantum state. Right here, right now. I'm letting the others go. They nodded. They understood, because they were me, and I was them. And we all knew what had to be done. I closed my eyes and focused on the weight of my body, the feeling of the ground under my feet, the warmth of the sun on my face. This moment, this place, this reality, real. I felt the other 3 versions of myself begin to fade, their quantum states releasing, their possibilities collapsing into impossibility. It didn't hurt. It felt like letting go of a breath I'd been holding, like relaxing a muscle that had been tense for too long. The pulling sensation stopped. The flickering stopped. When I opened my eyes, I was alone in the clearing. One Lisa Yazzie, standing in one place, in one reality. I looked at my hands. Solid, singular, real. I turned and ran back toward where I'd seen the Miller family. As I got closer, I could see Jake and his team standing in a loose circle around 3 people. Not 12 people, not 4 groups of 3, just 3. David, Karen, and Emma Miller. Singular. Real. Emma saw me first and ran toward me. "Officer Yazzie, you're back. You were gone for a minute, and then there were 4 of you, and then you disappeared, and now you're back." "I'm back," I confirmed, hugging her. She felt real, solid, normal. "Are you okay?" "I think so. I feel weird, like I had 4 dreams at once, but I'm okay." The medical team checked all 3 Millers. Vital signs, normal. No injuries. Mild hypothermia, but nothing serious. Physically, they were fine. But when we asked them what had happened, they couldn't quite explain it. They remembered hiking the trail, stopping to take photos, and then discontinuity. Like a video with frames missing. One moment they were on the trail, the next moment they were in 4 different canyons, and then suddenly they were back together with a rescue team standing around them. It was like we were dreaming, Karen said. Or like reality was a choose-your-own-adventure book, and we experienced all the different endings at once. That was as good a description as any. Back at the station, Sarah ran tests on all of us. The magnetic field had stabilized. The quantum anomalies were gone. The 4 quantum states had collapsed into one, and reality had returned to normal. Or as normal as it could be, given what we'd experienced. You did it, Sarah said, looking at the data. You forced the wave function to collapse cleanly. One timeline, one reality, everyone intact. It didn't feel like I did it, I admitted. It felt like I just chose, and the universe did the rest. That's essentially what quantum observation is. You don't create reality. You select which possibility becomes actual. What about the cell tower? Should we keep it shut down? For now, yes. Until we understand the magnetic anomaly better. The combination of natural magnetic field and artificial EM radiation created a quantum isolation effect that shouldn't be possible. We can't risk it happening again. Over the next few days, life slowly returned to normal. The Miller family recovered from their hypothermia and flew back to Colorado, though Emma kept in touch via email. She wanted to understand what had happened to them, wanted to make sense of the impossible experience. I didn't have all the answers, but I told her what I believed, that reality is more fluid than we think, that observation shapes existence, and that sometimes the choices we make determine not just our path, but the fundamental nature of what's real. 2 weeks after the incident, I was back on routine patrol, driving the familiar roads around Kayenta. The landscape looked the same as always. Red rocks, blue sky, endless horizon. But I saw it differently now. Every rock, every tree, every cloud existed in a specific configuration, because countless quantum events had collapsed into this particular reality. But there were other possibilities, other configurations, other realities that almost were but weren't. And somewhere in the quantum foam of probability, 3 other versions of me were still making choices, still collapsing wave functions, still determining which possibilities became real. Or maybe they weren't. Maybe when I chose this reality, those other possibilities ceased to exist in any meaningful way. Maybe I was the only Lisa Yazzie who had ever been real. I didn't know, and I suspected I never would. What I did know was this: observation matters. Choices matter. The act of deciding which possibility is real has consequences that ripple through the fabric of reality itself. And I knew that Monument Valley would always be a place where the boundaries between possible and actual were thinner than most people realized, where quantum effects could manifest at scales they shouldn't, where reality itself was negotiable. The drone sat in its case in the back of my unit, its sensors and cameras ready to observe, to document, to turn possibility into actuality. I hoped I'd never need to use it that way again, but I kept it charged and ready, just in case. Because sometimes the most important thing a police officer can do isn't enforce the law or catch criminals. Sometimes it's choosing which version of reality gets to be real, and living with that choice. 3 months after the incident at Monument Valley, I woke up at 3 a.m. with the absolute certainty that something was wrong. Not the vague unease of a bad dream, but a specific physical sensation of wrongness, like a frequency just below the threshold of hearing that makes your teeth ache. I lay in bed in my apartment in Kayenta, staring at the ceiling, trying to identify what had pulled me from sleep. Then I felt it again. That pulling sensation I'd felt during the quantum collapse. faint, distant, but unmistakable. It was happening again. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. 3:14 a.m. Then I pulled up the monitoring app Sarah Nez had built to track the magnetic field at Monument Valley. We'd been watching it continuously since the incident, looking for any signs of instability. The graph showed a spike, a big one. Magnetic field strength had jumped 30% in the last hour. I called Sarah immediately. She answered on the first ring, breathless. "You felt it too," she said. Not a question. "Yeah, what's happening?" "The anomaly is active again. And Lisa, it's not just Monument Valley. I'm getting readings from 3 other locations across the nation. Shiprock, Canyon to Chelly, and Window Rock. They're all showing magnetic spikes and other things." "What other things?" "The quantum sensors I placed after the incident. They're detecting superposition states, multiple realities existing simultaneously. It's spreading." I was already getting dressed, grabbing my gear. "I'm heading to the station. Meet me there." Already on my way. At the station, I found Sergeant Benally and 2 other officers already assembling. The dispatch board showed multiple calls coming in. Strange sightings, people seeing duplicates of themselves, objects existing in 2 places at once. "It's happening all over the nation," Benally said. "Whatever we did 3 months ago, it didn't fix the problem. It just delayed it." Sarah arrived 20 minutes later, her laptop already open and streaming data. "The magnetic anomalies aren't isolated incidents. They're part of a larger pattern. Look at this." She showed us a map of the Navajo Nation with 4 points marked. Monument Valley, Shiprock, Canyon to Chelly, and Window Rock. Lines connected them, forming a perfect square. "These are the 4 sacred mountains of Navajo cosmology," she explained. Well, not exactly the mountains themselves, but points aligned with them. And at each point the quantum effects are manifesting. Thomas Whitehorse's words came back to me. 4 worlds. The layers of reality stacked on top of each other. The 4 worlds are bleeding together. "More than bleeding," Sarah said. "They're collapsing. All 4 realities are trying to occupy the same space. If this continues, the entire nation could become one massive quantum superposition. Can we stop it the same way we stopped it before? Go to each location and force a collapse? That might work for 1 location, but there are 4 active sites now, and they're linked. If you collapse one, the energy has to go somewhere. It might just make the others worse. So, what do we do?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, scrolling through data. "There's a theoretical solution. In quantum mechanics, when you have entangled particles, you can sometimes resolve superposition by creating a coherent state. Instead of forcing a collapse, you guide all the possibilities into a single, stable configuration. In English? We don't fight the 4 worlds bleeding together. We help them merge correctly. Find the common ground between all 4 realities and anchor everything to that." "And how do we do that?" "We need to go to the center point. Not the center of one location, but the center of all 4 locations. The geometric center of the square they form." She did some calculations. "That would be approximately here." She marked a spot on the map. Middle of nowhere, about 30 miles southwest of Chinle. I looked at the map. The location was remote, accessible only by rough dirt roads, surrounded by empty desert and rocky hills. What's there? According to the map, nothing. But according to my calculations, it's the quantum nexus, the point where all 4 sacred mountains and all 4 quantum anomalies are equidistant. If we can create a stable observation at that point, we might be able to guide the collapse of all 4 sites simultaneously. Benally frowned. "You're talking about going into the middle of nowhere at night to perform quantum physics experiments during an active anomaly event." "Yes." That's insane. So, is reality fracturing across the entire Navajo Nation? We have to try. He looked at me. Lisa, this is your call. You're the one who resolved the first incident. Are you willing to try again? I thought about the pulling sensation I'd felt, the memory of standing in 4 places at once, the impossibility of choosing which reality was real. I thought about Emma Miller's voice saying, "Which one is real?" and not having an answer. And I thought about my grandmother asleep in her hogan 30 miles from here, and what would happen to her if quantum superposition spread to her home. I'll do it, but I'm not going alone. Thomas Whitehorse needs to come. If we're trying to merge 4 worlds, we need someone who understands them from both a scientific and a traditional perspective. By 4:30 a.m., we'd assembled a small team, me, Sarah, Thomas, and 2 other officers for safety. We loaded into 2 vehicles and headed southwest from Kayenta, following GPS coordinates toward the calculated nexus point. The drive took almost 2 hours, the last 45 minutes on dirt roads that barely deserved the name. As we got closer, I started feeling the effects. The pulling sensation returned, stronger now. Through the truck's windshield, I could see reality flickering, multiple versions of the landscape overlapping. Thomas sat beside me, his eyes closed, speaking softly in Navajo. A prayer, I realized, or a ceremony of some kind, asking permission from the land, from the spirits, from whatever forces govern the boundaries between worlds. We reached the nexus point at 6:47 a.m., just as dawn was breaking. The location was a small basin surrounded by low hills, completely unremarkable except for one thing. In the center of the basin stood a single, ancient juniper tree. "That tree shouldn't be here," Sarah said, checking her maps. "This area has been surveyed multiple times. There's never been a tree at this location." I studied the tree through binoculars. It flickered, phasing in and out of visibility. It's not from one reality, it's from all 4. Thomas opened his eyes and looked at the tree. The world tree. In our creation stories, there's a tree that connects all 4 worlds. It exists in all of them simultaneously. I never thought it was literal. Everything is literal when quantum mechanics is involved, Sarah muttered, setting up her equipment. We approached the tree on foot, carrying Sarah's quantum sensors and monitoring equipment. As we got closer, the effects intensified. I could see multiple versions of Sarah, multiple versions of Thomas, multiple versions of myself, all walking toward the tree from slightly different angles. "Everyone stay calm," I called out to the versions of my team. "We're all heading to the same place. We're all real until we decide otherwise." The tree stood about 15 feet tall, its twisted branches reaching toward a sky that couldn't decide which color it wanted to be. Blue in one reality, gray in another, orange in a third, purple in a fourth. All 4 skies occupied the same space, all 4 versions of dawn happening simultaneously. Sarah set up her equipment around the tree's base. "The quantum field here is off the charts. This isn't just superposition. This is a stable quantum state, all 4 possibilities existing in perfect equilibrium. Can we maintain that?" I asked. "Instead of collapsing to one reality, can we let all 4 exist?" "Not for long. Quantum equilibrium is inherently unstable in our universe. Eventually, decoherence will force a collapse. But maybe we can guide it. Choose not which reality becomes real, but how they merge." Thomas placed his hand on the tree trunk. In the creation stories, the hero twins traveled between the 4 worlds using a world tree. They didn't choose one world over another. They carried pieces of each world with them, integrating them into a new whole. "Integration instead of elimination," Sarah said. "That might work. Lisa, you did the observation last time. You forced the collapse. Can you do the opposite? Can you observe all 4 states and accept them all as equally real? I don't know. Last time I had to choose one and let the others go. This time, choose all of them. Hold all 4 possibilities in your mind as equally valid, equally actual. Don't try to resolve them into one. Just accept the paradox. I approached the tree and placed both hands on its trunk. The bark was cool and rough under my palms, but the texture kept changing. In one reality, it was smooth. In another, deeply furrowed. In another, covered with moss. In another, bare and weathered. I closed my eyes and opened my mind to all 4 sensations simultaneously. It was overwhelming. My consciousness tried to fragment, to split into 4 versions that could each process one reality. But I fought against that instinct. Instead, I tried to hold all 4 experiences at once without choosing between them. The tree was smooth and rough. The sky was blue and gray and orange and purple. I was standing still and moving forward and turning left and falling backward. All of it happening simultaneously, all of it real. The paradox should have been impossible. The human mind isn't designed to process contradictory information as equally valid. We're built to resolve, to choose, to decide between competing interpretations of reality. But I didn't resolve. I didn't choose. I just held the paradox and accepted it. And something shifted. The pulling sensation reversed. Instead of reality trying to tear itself apart into 4 separate states, I felt it pulling together, integrating, merging, not by choosing one possibility and eliminating the others, but by weaving all 4 together into a new pattern. The tree stopped flickering, but it didn't settle into a single appearance. Instead, it existed as a sort of superposition made permanent, visible to the naked eye. Looking at it directly, you could see all 4 versions overlaid. Quantum and classical physics existing in the same space without collapsing. The same thing was happening to the landscape. The sky held all 4 colors simultaneously, creating a dawn that had never existed in any single reality. The ground was red sand and gray rock, and brown earth and white clay, all occupying the same space. "This is impossible," Sarah whispered, staring at her instruments. "Macroscopic quantum states can't be stable. They should collapse immediately." "Unless something is protecting them," Thomas said. "In our stories, the world tree doesn't just connect the 4 worlds. It holds them in balance, prevents anyone from dominating the others." I opened my eyes but kept my hands on the tree. I could feel it now. The tree acting as a kind of quantum anchor, maintaining the superposition, preventing decoherence. As long as the tree existed, all 4 realities could coexist. "It's working," I said. "The 4 worlds aren't collapsing. They're merging." "But is this sustainable?" Sarah asked. "Can reality exist in this state indefinitely? I don't know, but it's better than letting the entire nation fragment into unstable quantum states." We stayed at the tree for 3 hours, monitoring the effect. The quantum integration spread outward from the nexus point, gradually encompassing the 4 active anomaly sites: Monument Valley, Shiprock, Canyon to Chelly, Window Rock. All of them stopped flickering, stopped trying to choose between possibilities. Instead, they existed in stable superposition, multiple realities occupying the same space. It should have been chaos. It should have been impossible. But it worked. By mid-morning, the reports from across the nation confirmed it. The quantum effects had stabilized. People were no longer seeing duplicates of themselves or experiencing temporal discontinuities. Reality had settled into a new normal, a normal that included the visible presence of multiple simultaneous states. We drove back to Kayenta, exhausted but relieved. As we entered town, I noticed the changes. Small things, mostly. Buildings that looked slightly different depending on which angle you viewed them from. People whose appearances seemed to shift subtly as you watched. The integration of 4 worlds created a reality that was layered, multifaceted, quantum, at a visible scale. "People are going to freak out," one of the officers said. "People are resilient," Thomas replied. "They'll adapt. Humans always do." Over the next few weeks, that prediction proved accurate. After the initial shock, people on the Navajo Nation adjusted to the new quantum normal. Children, particularly, adapted quickly, playing games that took advantage of the layered realities. Hide and seek, where you could hide in a slightly different version of the same space. Scientists from around the world descended on the nation, wanting to study the phenomenon. Sarah became the de facto spokesperson, explaining what we'd done and why it worked. "We didn't fight quantum mechanics," she told them. "We worked with it. Instead of forcing decoherence, we found a stable, coherent state." The 4 worlds of Navajo cosmology turned out to be a blueprint for quantum integration. Emma Miller emailed me after seeing the news. "So the whole nation is like we were? Existing in multiple states at once?" "Sort of," I wrote back. "But more stable, more intentional. We're not trapped between realities anymore. We're living in all of them simultaneously by choice." "That's beautiful," she replied. "And terrifying. Yeah, that pretty much sums it up." 6 months after the integration, I was back on routine patrol, the drone packed in its case in the back of my unit. The landscape looked the same as always, but now I could see it truly. The quantum substrate beneath classical reality, the multiple possibilities existing simultaneously, the fluid boundary between what is and what might be. A call came in, missing person near Combe Ridge. I grabbed the drone and headed out. When I arrived, I deployed the drone and sent it up. The thermal imaging showed heat signatures, but they were different now. Instead of distinct single points, they showed as probability clouds, areas where a person was likely to be rather than definitely was. I followed the densest part of the cloud and found the missing hiker sitting on a rock, completely unaware they'd been reported missing. They'd just wandered a bit farther than planned and lost track of time. Simple. Normal. Just another rescue and just another day. Except it wasn't normal, not anymore. Because now I could see that the hiker existed in multiple positions simultaneously, collapsed into a single location by the act of observation, but always carrying the quantum possibility of being elsewhere. We all did. Every person, every object, every moment. The drone showed me the truth. Reality was never as solid as we pretended. It was always a superposition of possibilities, collapsed by observation into a single actuality, but never losing its quantum nature. The 4 worlds had always existed simultaneously. We'd just never been able to see it before. Now we could. And we'd have to learn to live with that knowledge. As I drove back to the station, I thought about the choice I'd made at the World Tree, to accept paradox rather than resolve it, to integrate rather than eliminate, to let multiple realities coexist instead of forcing one to dominate. It was the right choice. I was certain of that, but certainty itself was different now. Because in a quantum universe where multiple possibilities existed simultaneously, certainty was just the temporary collapse of probability, and probability could always change. I kept the drone charged and ready. Because now that reality itself was fluid, the job of a police officer was no longer just maintaining order in a single world. It was maintaining balance across all 4, and making sure that when observation collapsed possibility into actuality, the right choices got made. The choices that let people coexist with paradox. The choices that honored all possibilities. The choices that let reality be as fluid and beautiful and terrifying as it actually was. I pulled into the station parking lot and sat in my unit for a moment, looking up at the sky. It was blue and gray and orange and purple all at once. Dawn and noon and sunset and midnight happening simultaneously. 4 worlds merged into one reality holding 4 possibilities. It was beautiful, and it was home.